welcome back to my channel, True Crime and Trials, and today I will be covering day 2 of the penalty phase of the Anthony Pardon trial. So we continue with Bob Stinson from yesterday, the forensic psychologist. He says the time Anthony spent in prison from being 17 was the worst time in his life. He was beaten, stabbed and raped twice. So he shows part of his presentation of adult trauma. Anthony got into trouble in prison. He had write-ups, but he was bound to with being in prison so long. Most of Anthony's write-ups were for disobeying orders, and Bob Stinson says they were relatively minor write-ups. There's no doubt in Bob's mind that as a kid Anthony had conduct disorder. This developed into antisocial personality disorder as an adult. A person isn't just born with a conduct disorder, it develops as a product of their environment and their experiences. Anthony was put into treatment centres, but they were more like sheltered housing type thing. They were facilities of child services due to him not being fostered. He was never given any treatment for his mental issues. Anthony also has an alcohol use disorder, and he meets the criteria for PTSD and depression, which his main symptoms are irritability, and he also has panic attacks. Anthony has had evaluations done in the past, and the recommendations that were made, there was no follow-up to them. He also talks about brain damage and showing the reasons why Bob thinks Anthony may have brain damage. Basically, Bob says you can't be shocked at why Anthony is on trial now due to the negative experiences, trauma and abuse he has endured from a young age. I disagree, but he's the defence for Anthony, so, well, I wonder if he would think differently if it was his daughter that had been murdered. Would he be saying the same thing? Oh, well, going off his childhood and, everything that happened, it were bound to happen. And then they talk about moral values, etc. Probably didn't mature from childhood, and prison made it worse. And believes Anthony got worse after spending 25 years in prison. I have no sympathy for this guy whatsoever. You've got to remember what he did to Rachel, and that's not just going out and murdering someone because your head's a mess. He raped her, he stabbed her, he suffocated her, he hog-tied her. That's a process. So the cross-examination, this went on for a while. There were constant sidebars because the defence kept objecting to the line of questioning. So I'll try and get through this as quick as I can. So Bob first saw Anthony on the 12th of July 2018, almost 6 months after Rachel's murder, and he met with him for 3.5 hours. Then he met him again on the 16th of October 2018, 8 months after the murder. Then on the 5th of January 2020, over a year later. He created the presentation that's been shown on the 16th of January 2020. These dates are just crazy. Anthony had his first psychology report in December 1981, but Bob only saw this yesterday, and again the day before this testimony, and again he reiterates the fact that he didn't get everything he should have. And he says in that evaluation in 1981, Anthony did have some testing done, and one test result said Anthony did not have any organic brain damage, only learning disabilities. And there's a bit of a back and forth about organic brain damage. Bob recommended that a neurologist be involved in this case, Another report was done in 1999, a psychological report that is done before he was paroled the first time around. On the report, Anthony had been declared a sex offender, but he never registered. Anthony did serve the full 25-year sentence he got for attempted murder, and Anthony had said to Bob that he was never offered any sex offender treatment, although he kept asking for it. But the state says, does Bob know of any times Anthony refused that treatment? He doesn't, but I'm guessing that they actually know that he did refuse it. Bob doesn't have any police reports with regards to the abuse of Anthony and his siblings and his mum that they got at home. The state then shows Bob a report from when he was in prison 25 years ago, and Anthony had said he didn't need sex offender treatment because he could control himself. So that kind of puts Bob's statement about Anthony not receiving the sex offender treatment and it was all the prison's fault. Anthony was up for parole, and it was reviewed in 1983, and it was said that Anthony should serve his full 25 years. Anthony exhibited no conscience and they said he, if he got back out, he may kill his next victim because he was in for attempted murder. He hadn't actually killed her. So they're saying, no, keep him in, because if he's let out now, he will actually kill someone. And obviously, it didn't matter how long he stayed in prison, he still went out and did it anyway. Anthony was once transferred because of the 17 infractions that he received in prison, the write-ups and so on. They actually found a knife in Anthony's cell, which is called a shiv in prison, which is a makeshift knife that they make from whatever they can find. Anthony had set his mattress on fire, he'd been fighting, disrespecting staff. There were over 50 infractions in the 35 years Anthony had spent in prison. So he wasn't the model prisoner, was he? Bob hadn't spoke to Anthony's mother directly. He got info from her through others and other family members. Anthony's girlfriend had visited Anthony often in the lead up to the trial. Bob doesn't believe Anthony has any psychotic disorders. Bob knew that Anthony drank alcohol daily, so it's highly likely he would have been drinking at the time of the offence. Redirect. An evaluation was done on Anthony in 1981, and it said he had antisocial personality disorder. So at this point, Anthony Pardon makes his own statement, but it's done not under oath and he won't be cross-examined, but he is allowed to give a statement under Ohio law. So throughout this, he cries, he's looking at the jury, he's, looking for sympathy. He says his mother wasn't the best mother, but she did what she had to do. His siblings weren't the best, but they did what they had to do. There were a lot of things the jury didn't hear about him and his family. I think they heard enough. He loved and hated his dad. His father beat him so bad with a pull cue it left scars on his back. He learned how to be who he is now, being in the worst prison in Ohio. Why were you in prison in the first place, Anthony? He did what he did in prison to survive. He did what he had to do. He had to adapt to make it out of there. And once he was out, he couldn't keep or get a job because of his background. He admits he made a lot of bad choices. He's happy his dad is gone. Everybody failed him. He just wanted the jury to hear from him and not just everyone else. He respects any decision the jury make. It's alright him putting across his statement, but, he's on trial for murdering a young woman. So despite how bad his childhood was and how badly treated he's been, he's still convicted of murder. So the defence rests their case at this point, so we go into closing arguments, and obviously it's the prosecution, so they're going over aggravating circumstances, and showing what aggravating circumstances qualifies Anthony for the death penalty, and they say Anthony has 5 of those. His prior conviction for attempted murder, he actually committed the offence while committed aggravated burglary. He committed the murder while committing the aggravated kidnapping. The homicide took place either while he committed a rape or while he's fleeing after the rape. He committed the offence while committing or attempting to commit the aggravated robbery. Mitigating circumstances. How did Anthony get to this point? She says there are no mitigating circumstances in this case, and saying that the jury, they all need to be unanimous. She says lots of people have terrible childhoods, etc., but they get through and aren't sat in court guilty of murder facing the death penalty. Amen to that. When you have 17 infractions in 1 year in prison, then at some point you will be moved to a higher level prison. He served all his time in prison because he was awful in prison. This is not the state's or the system's fault. All true. The defence, they go over Anthony's childhood and how bad it was, and she says his childhood did affect his choices. But right is right and wrong is wrong. The state, again, there are 5 very strong aggravating circumstances, and in Anthony's statement he never said sorry. It was all about him from beginning to end. No remorse. Nothing. Absolutely nothing about what he did. No apology. No sympathy for the family or anything. So the jury go out for deliberations, and it takes them 3 hours and 20 minutes for them to come up with life in prison without parole on all counts, so no death penalty. And the camera pans over to Rachel's mother, and she's visibly upset, and the jury were deadlocked in their decision on all counts, so the decision has to be a life sentence without parole. So the formal sentencing will be on the 16th. As I was saying, the formal sentencing will be on the 16th of March. So when that goes through, I will do another video, and then that will be the end of the Anthony Pardon trial. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope my coverage has been informative. But yeah, he didn't get the death penalty, but he's still going to spend a very long time in prison. So until then, bye for now.